Welcome to Wisdom Trek with Gramps. I am Guthrie Chamberlain, and we are on day 2638 of our trek. The purpose of Wisdom Trek is to create a legacy of wisdom, to seek out discernment and insights, and to boldly grow where few have chosen to grow before. In today's Wisdom Nugget, we'll be embarking on a trek through a different kind of terrain, a deep, often turbulent waters of the lament. We are opening our Bibles to Psalm 69, starting with verses 1 through 8 in the New Living Translation. Psalm 69 is one of the Bible's most poignant and powerful lament psalms. It is a raw cry from a soul that is in deep distress, feeling overwhelmed by suffering, enemies, and profound reproach. While it speaks to the personal anguish of the psalmist, often attributed to David, it is also profoundly a Messianic psalm, with its many verses finding the ultimate fulfillment in the suffering of Jesus Christ. For our trek today, however, we'll primarily focus on the psalmist's immediate experience, allowing his desperate plea to resonate with our own moments of overwhelming hardship. Lament is a vital part of our faith. It is the language we use when life doesn't make sense, when we feel abandoned, attacked, or misunderstood. The ancient Israelites understood this well. Their psalm provided a divine vocabulary for every human emotion, including profound sorrow and confusion. This psalm offers us a sacred space to bring our deepest pain and rawest emotions before God. So let's immerse ourselves in the opening verses of Psalm 69. First, let's read Psalm 69 verses 1 through 4. Save me, O God, for the floodwaters are up to my neck. Deeper and deeper I sink into the mire. I can't find a foothold. I am drowning in the deep waters. The floods overwhelm me. I am exhausted from crying for help. My throat is hoarse. My eyes are swollen red from weeping for my God. Those who hate me without cause are more numerous than the hairs on my head. These enemies who want to destroy me are powerful. They make me pay for crimes I didn't commit. I am forced to return what I did not steal. What a visceral, immediate cry for help. The psalmist wastes no time in conveying the urgency and desperation of his situation. He uses powerful, evocative image of being consumed by water. Save me, O God, for the floodwaters are up to my neck. Deeper and deeper I sink into the mire. I can't find a foothold. I am drowning in deep waters. The floods overwhelm me. This is more than just a powerful metaphor for trouble. It speaks of the profound sense of being utterly submerged and losing control. In the ancient Near East, deep waters, floods, and mire often symbolized chaos, death, and overwhelming peril. When the psalmist says the waters are up to my neck, it means that he's on the verge of suffocation, barely clinging to life. He's not just in the water, he's sinking into the mire, the thick mud that offers no solid ground, no hope for escape. He's being overwhelmed, completely overcome and consumed by the torrents of his troubles. Have you ever felt like this? Like you're sinking, unable to find firm ground, with the pressures of life threatened to swallow you whole? Perhaps it's a relentless financial struggle, or a crushing illness, overwhelming grief, or a relenting wave of accusations. The psalmist gives voice to the suffocating feeling, the sense of being utterly out of control and unable to help yourselves. The emotional toll of this distress is evident in verse 3. I am exhausted from crying for help. My throat is hoarse. My eyes are swollen red from weeping for my God. This isn't a casual complaint. It is a lament from someone who's cried out to God insistently, tirelessly, to the point of physical exhaustion. His voice is gone. His eyes are raw from insensate weeping. This shows not only an intensity of suffering, but also the persistence of his prayer. Even in his utter depletion, his focus is still on my God. He is crying out to God, even when his body gives out. This paints a picture of resilient faith, even when the spirit is weary. The source of much of his anguish is revealed in verse 4, his enemies who hate me without cause. This is a profoundly painful aspect of his suffering, to be hated and attacked unjustly. More numerous than the hairs on my head is a hyperbolic expression emphasizing the sheer multitude of his adversaries. These enemies are just not numerous, they are powerful, capable of inflicting real harm and pressing their advantage. And then comes a gut-wrenching accusation. They make me pay for crimes I didn't commit. I am forced to return what I didn't steal. This speaks to the agony of false accusations and forced restitution for wrongs he did not commit. In ancient Israelite society, honor and reputation were paramount. To be publicly accused of crimes, especially stealing, and then forced to compensate them without having committed them would have been devastating blows to one's standing, integrity, and social acceptance. It is the ultimate injustice, a profound portrayal of truth and fairness. The psalmist not only is suffering physically and emotionally, but he is also being unjustly condemned and defrauded by his powerful, numerous enemies. This opening lament sets the stage for the plea for justice and vindication, born out of deep personal anguish and profound sense of injustice. It's a cry for God to intervene because the psalmist has reached his absolute limit. Now let's continue our trek in verses 5 through 8, where the psalmist acknowledges God's omniscience and expresses concern for others, revealing the depth of his suffering for God's sake. "O God, you know how foolish I am. My sins are not hidden from you. Don't let me be a stumbling block to those who trust in you, O sovereign Lord of all. Don't let me cause them to be humiliated, O God of Israel, for I am suffering shame for your sake. Humiliation is written across my face. Even my own brothers insult me and treat me like a stranger." After a passionate complaint against his enemies and the overwhelming nature of his problems, the psalmist turns to a moment of raw honesty before God in verse 5. "O God, you know how foolish I am. My sins are not hidden from you." This is a crucial admission in a lament. While the psalmist has been crying out for injustice from others, he doesn't present himself as perfectly innocent before God. He acknowledges his own foolishness and that his sins are not hidden from God's all-seeing eye. This confession reveals a deep spiritual maturity. He doesn't blame God for his suffering, nor does he deny his own imperfections. He understands that God knows him completely, flaws and all. This honesty before God is essential for true lament. It is not about being perfect. It's about being real with the one who knows everything. It creates a foundation of humility and trust, even in the midst of bitter complaints. But the psalmist's concern extends beyond his own suffering in verses 6 and 7. "Don't let me be a stumbling block to those who trust in you, O sovereign Lord of all. Don't let me cause them to be humiliated, O God of Israel, for I am suffering shame for your sake. Humiliation is written across my face." This is a selfless prayer, a profound concern for the impact his suffering might have on others who trust in God. In the ancient Israelite society, public humiliation and suffering could be perceived as a sign of God's displeasure. If the psalmist, someone who ostensibly follows God, was seen to be suffering so terribly and unjustly, it could be a cause for others to doubt God's goodness, power, or justice. It could stumble their faith or cause them to be humiliated because of their association with a seemingly abandoned servant of God. The psalmist's motivation for enduring this shame is revealed. "For I am suffering shame for your sake. Humiliation is written across my face." This is a powerful statement. His suffering is not just personal misfortune, it is directly connected to his allegiance to God. He is bearing reproach, shame, and humiliation because of his faith, because he stands for God, or because of his association with God's purposes. This is suffering for righteousness' sake, a concept deeply resonated throughout the biblical narrative, and particularly a life of Christ. Think of those throughout history who have endured public scorn or persecution simply for their faith. From early Christians facing Roman persecution to believers in totalitarian regimes today. Their suffering, when viewed by others, can be a test of faith. The psalmist is praying for this trial that will not cause others to falter or to be shamed, but instead ultimately strengthen their trust in God. The personal cost of his suffering is further emphasized in verse 8. "Even my own brothers insult me and treat me like a stranger." This is perhaps the most painful kind of alienation, rejection by one's own family. In a collectivist society like ancient Israel, family ties were paramount. To be insulted and treated like a stranger by one's own kin was a devastating form of social ostracization. It meant losing a very support system and a sense of belonging that was crucial for survival and identity. This speaks of the depth of the psalmist's isolation and betrayal, amplifying the pain of his suffering for God's sake. Psalm 69, verses 1 through 8, introduces us to a man utterly overwhelmed, unjustly accused, and deeply shamed, not just by enemies, but even by his own family. All this because of his devotion to God. Yet even in his profound distress, he remains honest with God about his own sins and shows deep concern for the faith of others. What can we take from this raw, honest lament for our wisdom trek today? Firstly, it provides a powerful model of expressing our deepest distress to God. When we feel overwhelmed, sinking, exhausted, or unjustly treated, we can use the language of lament. God invites our authentic, unfiltered cries for help. Secondly, it reminds us of the importance of honesty before God, even in our own lament. While we may complain about our circumstances or others, we must also acknowledge our own imperfection and sins, trusting in God's complete knowledge and grace. Thirdly, it challenges us to consider the cost of discipleship. Sometimes our suffering, especially when we endure reproach or misunderstanding for our faith, can be for God's sake. In those moments, we are called to persevere, even while our hearts cry out to God for vindication. And finally, it teaches us to pray not just for ourselves, but also for the impact our struggles might have on others. Our witness in suffering can either stumble or strengthen the faith of those around us. Let us pray that our endurance, by God's grace, will ultimately point others to Him, preventing them from being shamed or helping them to trust in the sovereign Lord of all. Thank you for joining me on this profound trek through the opening verses of Psalm 69. I trust that this exploration of lament and endurance will resonate with your own journey and equip you to bring the deepest concerns before our compassionate God. Join me again next time as we continue to seek and apply the timeless truths of God's Word. And if you found this podcast insightful, please subscribe and leave us a review. Then encourage your friends and family to join us and come along with us tomorrow for another day of Wisdom Trek, creating a legacy. Thank you so much for allowing me to be your guide, your mentor, and most importantly, I am your friend as I serve you through the Wisdom Trek podcast and journal. And as we take this trek of life together, let us always live abundantly, love unconditionally, listen intentionally, learn continuously, lend to others generously, lead with integrity, and leave a living legacy each day. I am Guthrie Chamberlain, reminding you to keep moving forward, enjoy your journey, and create a great day every day. See you next time for more daily wisdom.